This is Lesson 7, corresponding to Chapter 7, Firewall Basics. This is Part 1 of 2 parts. The learning objective is to manage and monitor firewalls and understand their limitations. Some key concepts: firewall rules and their application in restricting and permitting data transit, the limitations and weaknesses of firewalls and how they introduce vulnerabilities, resolving conflicts between block ports and firewall rules, improving firewall performance, and firewall logging and monitoring techniques. Firewall rules are sometimes called a filter or access control list, an ACL. They're also an instruction set that indicates how a firewall should take action on a particular type of network traffic. Some common rules on firewalls include access to insecure internet websites, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, access to secure internet websites, HTTP over SSL or TLS, access to other internet website protocols, SQL and Java, for example, rules on inbound internet email, rules on outbound internet email. Talk about ingress and egress filtering. We don't want to allow external entities to initiate a connection unless you're running internal services such as a web server. Inbound rules when an internal resource is specifically hosted for the purpose of being accessed by external entities. We want to use a single IP address single IP address for a single host and the correct subnet or range designation for a collection of hosts. We want to specify the port when possible, otherwise use a valid port range. Some communications that are commonly blocked: all ICMP traffic originating from the internet, any traffic directed specifically to the firewall, any traffic to known closed ports, any traffic to known ports of known malware, inbound TCP/53 to block external DNS zone transfer requests, inbound UDP/53 to block external DNS user queries, any traffic from IP addresses on a blacklist, any traffic from internal IP addresses that are not assigned. Some general guidelines for firewall rules. Direction matters. Be sure to validate that the source and target addresses have been identified correctly. A deny all catch-all rule always goes at the bottom of the list. Denial exceptions go at the top of the list. Rules pertaining to more common traffic belong closer to the top of the list. You want to keep the number of rules to a minimum. Every rule enforced by a firewall should be written in the security policy. Only rules in the written security policy should be enforced by a firewall. Don't just document that a rule exists and what the basic rule structure is. Also include a description of the intention and purpose of the rule. What ports should be allowed? Here are 3 specific ones: 443, 80 for HTTP, 25 for SMTP. Any required environmentally specific application ports. What ports should be blocked? All others with the deny all rule. Here's an image of a firewall rule example. The firewall system from SonicWall. And at the very bottom, you can see Rule 11 is a deny all rule. You can look at the columns. You can see a source, a destination, the service that's involved, the action, and any options and how it's configured. Firewall rule components. You have a base protocol set as TCP, UDP, ICMP, or any other layer 2, 3, or 4 protocols. A source address set as a specific IP address, a subnet, a range of addresses, or any for all possible addresses. A source port set as a specific port, a set of ports, a range of ports, ports less than or greater than or any for all possible ports. Target address set as a specific IP address, a subnet, a range of addresses, or any for all possible addresses. Target port set as a specific port, a set of ports, a range of ports, or any for all possible ports. and an action. The two standard actions are allow and deny. Some firewalls also include log and alert actions that allow additional actions in a single rule. The common structure is that from left we have the protocol, the source address, the source port, the target address, the target port, and whatever action is going to be taken. So the example below shows that the source address and port are often set as any unless a rule applies to a specific system or port. Here we have TCP as the protocol. The source address is inside our network. 192.168.42.0 subnetted at 24 indicates it's inside our network because of the subnet. Any source port, any target address, any target port. So the message can go, or the data being transmitted can go out on HTTP to the web, to any website, and it's allowed. Because of course we want to allow those users to be able to hit on any target IP address at any target, using HTTP, which is port 80. Here we have a more specific example, and we'll go down each one of these. We want to, first of all, at the very top, allow the response to TCP connections to internal hosts. And you'll notice the target address is subnetted at subnet/24, port anything greater than 1023, and that's allowed. So all response to TCP connections to internal hosts are allowed. But we want to prevent the firewall, which is located at 192.168.42.1, from directly connecting to anything. We want to prevent the third one, to prevent the external host from directly accessing the firewall. So any source IP address, any source port hitting on the target of 192.168.42.1, which is the firewall, we want to deny. We want to allow internal hosts, again those located in subnet/24 on any port, to access any external resource on any external port, so we allow that. The fifth one, we want to allow external hosts to send email inbound to us, to the email server at 192.168.42.55, and we know it's email because the port is 25, which is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, SMTP. The sixth one, we want to allow the external host to access an internal web server at 192.168.42.98. So in other words, we want to allow external entities to view what's on our web server, which if we're running a business, and it's a web-based business, even if it's not, but we have a website, we want our customers to be able to see it. And of course we know it's a web server because the port is 80 for HTTP. Our final rule is to apply a default deny rule to all traffic not matching a previous exception. Here this slide shows the description of the rules that were described, that I described on the previous slide. So here they are. Some other firewall rule guidelines. You want to use a single IP address for a single host and the correct subnet or range designation for a collection of hosts. You want to specify the port when possible, otherwise use a valid port range. You want to grant every system but a few specific ones access to a resource. Or to grant every system but a few specific ones access to a resource, you need a rule to block the few and allow the rest. Position the deny rule of this set before the allow rule of the rest, since the allow rule will likely be an any-based rule instead of naming all of the many that were granted access. When the wrong rule is positioned first, this creates a potential what we call loophole, which is a flaw in the logic of filtering that will allow an unwanted action to occur. And following this rule of thumb usually results in less access instead of greater access. List specific deny rules first, then the allow exceptions, and always keep the default deny rule last. This concludes part 1 of chapter 7.